And Israel represents the first time in thousands of years that Jews have power, the ability to defend themselves, as every people must. That power derives from the incredible fortitude of the Israeli population in conjunction with the unbreakable support that comes from the United States. And so, you know, we're really partners in this endeavor to make sure that Israel survives for 1,000 years and the Jewish people never again have to confront this horrific set of circumstances that occurred here in Birkenau and elsewhere in all the death camps.
I understand that, Ambassador Nides, this is your first time visiting and marching, but Ambassador Friedman, you have marched before.
I have.
What do you tell others about the importance of the International March of the Living?
Well, what I tell people is that you can be familiar with the Holocaust, you can read about the Holocaust, you can go to Yad Vashem, which is an incredible place, or the Holocaust museums in America, which are all very, very well done. But there's nothing like being here.
I absolutely agree with you. I'm just going to interject because I'm sure you're feeling the same thing. This is my first visit, and I knew a great deal about the Holocaust. But being here, it's different.
Yeah, and I can't. Listen, I'm here because David asked me to come here. I mean, obviously, no. I'm honest. To be clear, David came to see me 6 months ago and said, I didn't even heard of the March of the Living, to be honest with you, and said there's a wonderful, beautiful thing that I went to 4 years ago. It's called the March of the Living. Thousands of kids show up in Auschwitz to walk from Auschwitz to Birkenau. Would you be willing to co-chair it with me? And I said,
wow,
absolutely.
Fantastic.
You know, a Democrat, a Republican coming together. This doesn't know partisanship, as David knows. This is about fighting hatred, fighting anti-Semitism, making sure that young people never forget. And there's nothing more satisfying to me as an American, as the American ambassador to Israel, as a Jew. So I'm honored to be doing it.
We are unfortunately about to run out of time, but I'd like to hear briefly from you both. How concerned are you about the level of anti-Semitism in the United States, and do you believe enough is being done to combat that?
I'm very concerned. By definition, enough is not being done because we have to keep fighting and end this scourge. There's lots of ways to do it. It's a longer conversation.
Right.
But I believe a lot of people are committed to fight this as never before.
And any level of anti-Semitism is simply unacceptable.
Any level is unacceptable.
And then be clear. You know, we've got to do what we're doing today. Just look at these pictures behind us. This is what it's all. The future is not with David and me. The future is with the kids. And the kids need to understand it and need to fight it and understand it because the future is their future. And that's why this march is so important.
Amen.
Amen. What do you feel when you look at the young people? And then, of course, we have 40 Holocaust survivors leading the delegation today. When you imagine what it must be like for them.
It's really impossible to put yourself in their shoes. We struggle with it every day. Two of my kids went on this program and were forever changed by that.
As was my daughter. Yeah. But so, unfortunately, we need to tie up now. We need to let you go to the ceremony. I want to thank both of you very much for being here. U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Thomas Nides, and former Ambassador David Friedman. Thank you so much for
having us.
Thank you.
And we will now take another look at the March of Living in progress.
We're here now with Pastor Larry Huck, the founder and senior pastor of New Beginnings Church in Dallas, Texas, and also the International Larry Huck Ministries. Your television program, New Beginnings, is watched and followed by hundreds of thousands of people around the world. You do so much to support Israel. Can you tell me about some of the activities that you and your community do to support and strengthen the state of Israel?
Well, like just last year, we were able to raise and give to Israel around $2.5 million for Aliyah. That's our main thing we support, and to help feed Holocaust survivors. We work with Mogan David Adom for ambulances, and the purpose of that is that we teach people, number one, to love Israel, to love the Jewish people, and we have a saying, where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. And so as we get people to support Israel and stand with Israel, we see their heart growing towards the love of the nation of Israel and its right to exist.
Despite your positive messages, violent and soft anti-Semitism is rising in the United States. You know, why do you think that's happening?
Well, without getting too spiritual, I believe the attack that's always been against the Jewish people is an attack against God. That the Jewish people are the chosen race. They're the ones that gave the world the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I read in a speech that Hitler made years ago, I was researching, why this? Why Auschwitz? Why this hate? And Hitler said something in a speech to his leaders. He said, as long as there's one Jew left on the earth, there'll be the presence of God. And so I know I'm making it probably way, way too simple, but I believe the hatred towards the Jewish people is an hatred towards the kingdom of God. And when we are able to address Christians and say Jews and Christians alike, we're serving the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And you know, I know the statistics that say the number that anti-Semitism is growing, but I can tell you we have a couple million people that follow us, and their love for Israel and their love for the Jewish people and their love for the nation of Israel is growing, and it's like a snowball. It's like an avalanche of Christians' eyes being opened for the love of not only the land of Israel but for the Jewish people around the world.
And how important is it for people to come and get Holocaust education, even to see the sites of the Holocaust firsthand, like here at Auschwitz, in order to better understand the growing threats of anti-Semitism that we now face?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, this is my first trip. I've been standing with Israel for around 30 years, and last year I had the great privilege of spending 2 hours with Rabbi Lau, Israel Lau in Israel, and he said, come with me, walk with me. And being here, you know, 6 million is a number that we can't get our head around. But when you look at what happened to people here, it's not just 6 million people were murdered. It's 6 million somebody's mom, somebody's dad, somebody's child. And I didn't realize that I would feel what I'm feeling here and to realize that this was beyond inhuman. And once again, I think it's a spiritual thing. It's for people to treat anybody this way is not human. And when you come here, and I've been to Yad Vashem probably, you know, I'll be in Israel in 2 weeks, and this will be my 40th trip. And so I've been to Yad Vashem 40, 50 times, Holocaust museums around the world. They don't do what being here does, is because this is where those moms and those dads and those babies and those sons and those daughters breathe their last breath. And I'm bringing next year for the March of the Living, I'm bringing as many young people as I can, because we have to pass this about. I know it's almost becoming just words, but never again. And when you come here and you feel what you feel, you're going to say in your heart, not on my watch, never again. And I know that's kind of a cliche, but being here is a life changer.
Pastor Gary Huck, thank you so much for being with us. Back to you, Aaron.
Look, we see so many people have already arrived at Birkenau. We see men in uniform. We see different police officers. We see the young marchers. We've seen the Holocaust survivors. It's just incredibly moving. We see people with the flags. When you can look right there, and that's where a selection once was. That's where they actually took Jews off trains and chose who would live and who would die. Right where those people we're looking at were standing at one time. It's very hard not to have tears in your eyes when you think what happened on these grounds. Joining me now is Rev. Tal Kokovsky, the Deputy CEO of the International March of the Living. What can you tell us about the March of the Living overall?
Hello, Erin. We're celebrating our 35th anniversary today with 10,000 participants that are come from all four corners of the globe. We have people today from Australia to Brazil, from Argentina to Germany, people that are Jews, and many of them are non-Jews. The International March of the Living was founded under the basis that the Holocaust is not just a Jewish issue, it's a universal issue. And we need to educate the world at large about the lessons of the Holocaust, and they need to fight racism and anti-Semitism.
Can you elaborate a little bit more about what is special about today's March of the Living?
I think the most special thing about the march today is that we have 40 Holocaust survivors from across the world leading this march. They will be the first to march and lead the 10,000 participants. And for us, the survivors are like our hearts. I mean, we are here to hear the story from them and to pass it to the next generation. Elie Wiesel, who were in the 1990 march here, told us that when you listen to a witness, you become a witness. And what we do at the March of the Living is creating living witnesses to carry the torch of memory after the survivors are no longer be with us.
Absolutely. During the march, will they have time? Will they be able to interact with some of the young participants?
You have to understand that the march is a peak of a 7-day journey throughout Poland. They're visiting the ghettos, the camps, the synagogues, the cultural institutes. They're exploring 1,000 year of Jewish life, and they're spending time with the survivors on a long journey. The march is the peak of it. They're marching shoulder to shoulder, and they hear the story from there. They're there for them. They're hugging them, and this is what is so special about the March of the Living.
My own daughter attended the 2011 March of the Living, and I have to say, she was very impacted by it. Is that what you hear from the younger participants?
Yes. Also, we've conducted long-term impact research about the participant of the march, and what we have learned that people who are coming from the march are coming back more tolerant people. They're more activist towards fighting hatred in all of its forms. They're more connected to the Jewish identity and heritage. So the march has a long-term impact about the participants on a personal and also in a communal life that they're doing, and they're going back to the community as a change agent of torchbearer of Holocaust memory.
What about you personally? You've been involved in the International March of the Living for some time. How do you feel on successive visits back here?
This will be my 15th march. I was born on January 6th. The very same day my great-grandfather, Angelo Sonnino of Rome, was killed here in Auschwitz. So I feel very connected to the place, and through March of the Living I also met my husband, who was a journalist who came to cover the March of the Living, and we met her and here, and later he went to tutor groups to Poland. So the Holocaust is very much a family thing to us. It's personal, and I'm very proud to be with the International March of the Living and safeguarding Holocaust memory.
Do you ever find that it's too much? Your entire life, your profession, your family, you're oriented around this place.
You know, Erin, many people ask me about this, and my answer is no, it's never too much for me. I feel so privileged to be able to do what I'm doing. I can't get enough of spending time with Holocaust survivors, hugging them, listening to them. I feel that it's a great, great privilege, and I'm honored to do what I'm doing.
Are you concerned, I'm sure you are, about the fact that, I mean, today we are so lucky 40 Holocaust survivors are here, about the day that will come when time will have passed and they won't be able to join us?
Of course we're concerned, and I don't think the world is ready for the day without survivors. But what we're doing here at the March of the Living, as I said, we are creating new witnesses and people who will take the torch of memory and carry it to the next generations. This is our mission.
Tremendously important work. Revital Krakowski, thank you so much for taking the time to explain this to us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Erin.
Now we're taking a look again at the 2023 March in progress. Joining me now, we have two survivors with us. And I'd really like to thank you both for being not only with me today, but thank you for being here. Thank you for coming and sharing your stories with the participants. I think it's so critical. I am going to introduce you. We have Anita Caro, who was originally from what was then Poland, today's Ukraine. And we also have Rosette Adler Goldstein, who was a hidden child in France, but I'd like to have you share your stories. Tell us where you were born and how you survived.
I was born in Lviv in 1938. We were taken to the ghetto. The ghetto in Lviv was a horrible place.
How old were you when you moved to the ghetto?
I was 3 years old.
Unbelievable.
And I had two sisters. One was newly born and one was 2 years older. The ghetto of Lviv was a place that had 150 souls, Jews interned. The ghetto of Lviv was a place where it was easier to die than to live. From the 150,000 inmates, only 200 survived, and I am one of them.
I'm so glad. And Rosetta, would you tell us your story, Rosette, briefly?
I was born in Paris, France, in 1938. My parents were originally from Poland, from Lodz, and my father had been thrown out of the French army. Why? Because he was a Jew, and he enlisted in a camp in France for working for the French and German interests. And he saw what was happening, and he met a farmer. His name was Monsieur Martin, and he said to him, I have a 4-year-old daughter. You know what's happening. Would you hide her? And Monsieur Martin said, I don't know, I have to ask my wife. You know, it's very dangerous. And
At the risk of
day,
their own lives.
I'm sorry?
At the risk of their own lives.
Yes. And the next day, he came back and he said, I spoke to my wife. We have 3 daughters. We're going to have 4. And this is how I came to live with them.
Oh, my goodness. Can you tell me, why is it important for you to be here today? And both of you are traveling here today from the United States, from the state of Florida. Why is it important for you to be here today?
It is very important for us to be here so we can tell our story, because through education and looking back to the past, we can prevent the future to bring us unhappiness again. My mother was a very courageous woman who saved 3 children together. We escaped from the ghetto of Lviv and passed ourselves as Catholics. And I became a very fervent Catholic girl for about 2 years of my life. And it was even very difficult to go back to Judaism after the war. But I did, and today I have 2 children, a son and a daughter, and I have 6 grandchildren. And soon I will be a great-grandmother.
Mazal tov.
Toda rava.
And Ms. Carol?
I have been on 7 marches of the living.
I'm sorry, Rosette.
I feel it is so important for young people to hear us. We're in the winter of our lives. We're not going to be here much longer. And these children have to tell our stories, especially with the way things are going today. I'm very afraid. We've all of us have seen some of the things that are happening today, and we are frightened.
I just spoke to both U.S. ambassadors about the rising level of anti-Semitism, and no level is acceptable, and if enough is being done to combat that. But I'm also so terribly worried about the day when we can't hear voices from people who experience these things, that something will be lost. I hope that your descendants will learn from you. Is it hard for you to share your stories with your grandchildren, your children?
It is hard, but they listen, and they listen. And then we have opportunities, I'm sure, Rosette and I, to lecture at the schools and children that are younger, and they listen, and I hope they will learn.
I very much hope so. I need to let you go now to the ceremony. So, Rosette Adler Goldstein.
Yes.
Anita Caro, thank you again very much for being with us today.
And thank you for letting
you.
us be here and being able to convey how we feel.
It's my honor.
Thank you.
It's all of our honor.
Thank you so much.
Now we return to look at the march as more people arrive.
Blau Ella.
Do I talk? Do I talk? Do I talk?
Miklos. From
One of the most powerful moments of the 2022 March of the Living was the lighting of a torch of hope by Eitan Naislos, and a third-generation descendant of a Holocaust survivor, and the March of the Living ambassador to the Gulf states, His Excellency Ahmed al-Mansouri from the United Arab Emirates, who was also the founder of the first Holocaust Memorial in the Arab and Muslim world, which is called the Crossroads of Civilizations Museum. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Your participation here last year truly inspired millions around the world to believe that together we can defeat hate and promote tolerance. How did the march impact you?
Exactly 1 year ago, immediately prior to coming to the march, I stood at the House of Lords in London, and there I accepted the torch of remembrance from Holocaust survivor Eve Kruger. And we had a historic first. We invited Caroline, a descendant of a Nazi, third generation.
Oh my goodness.
And there, we didn't have one dry eye in the room. And I had a moment of enlightenment, understanding the importance of reconciliation and addressing the intergenerational trauma of the third generation and beyond. And so I asked myself a question: how can this torch of remembrance become a torch of divine truth, of peace and of unity? And how better form of an expression to invite His Excellency Ahmed al-Mansouri to join me at the march, to lead the march on behalf of the third generation, and light the torch of remembrance as a symbol of peace and of unity. And so I walked in through the gates of hell with a friend, and I walked out with a dear Muslim brother.
It's wonderful and very touching. And His Excellency?
Thank you very much. It was a great impact when I came here at so many levels. At one level is personal level, also regional level, also international level. Personal level, it was very educative for me. I mean, to see it, to experience. I mean, the worst genocide against humanity, which was happened to the Jews at that time, coming from an area that we don't talk much about it. We have known about the Holocaust. We know about the Aryan doctor and Hitler and what they have done, but I have never seen the experience. But when I went there, went to concentration camps, went to the places, still there are certain images that stays with me there, and helped me a lot also to improve my exhibition there about the Holocaust. And that exhibition, which we have started it in 2021, April 8th, that was Yom HaShoa at that time. And we had a commemoration, also the gallery. And we added more stories. Also, there's another side of it. It's the side of the hope, because for people who are denying Holocaust, for people who are refusing to talk about the Holocaust, this was something that it's a historical thing happened here. Being here, experiencing here, is totally much better than going to visit, simulations or museums on that,
Absolutely.
as Ambassador Friedman was saying. So, but at the end, now we are together, Arabs and Jews, Muslims and Jewish people, hand by hand, side by side, swearing
wonderful.
and having the covenant, the bond to stop and this to not happen again, never ever to happen again. On the international level, right after the March of the Living, I was honored to be invited by His Holiness the Pope to join with my Israeli friends to go talk only about the Holocaust. And exactly 1 month, and from 18th April and 18th of May, I was there in the Vatican. And for the first time, we took gifts there from the Holocaust, and they are permanently in the Museum of the Vatican. Regional level, this also, if I talk about it just very briefly, it helped many people to understand more, because it opened the conversation. The whole idea is about communication conversation. And, and how can we move forward, and try to really focus on the hope. And I have a section about the hope, about the righteous among the nations.
We'll hear later.
Yeah, about that.
I would like to follow up with you, Your Excellency, and ask you about last year, just a year ago, you hosted an historic event in Dubai that marked the 84 years since the Kristallnacht. How was that event received there?
was very powerful event. You know, with my brother Aitan and with March of the Livings, we've organized this event, and we expected, you know, less people coming there. By the time there, we have local media, people from the local community. We have the children, the students, my children also. They were involved in it, lighting the torch there.
Very
Of course, the message should go back, or also could continue as message, and and it was live. In Israel and all around the world. So I was very honored to host, the March of the Living, the international event for the Crystal Nacht in the museum. And that event paved the way for my last event in January for the International Day of Holocaust. I had double the size people came, more people from the Arab world and from the local community, and more people are asking about the Holocaust more and learning more about it. So such events, it's very important. For us, peace is not about political, economic, or defense. These are only important to pave the way. For us, it's a complete, we take it completely in a compassionate way.
Eitan, exactly a year ago, you stood here with a shoebox containing memories that your grandmother had during the Holocaust. Just a few months after that, you joined the March of the Living, the campaign specifically Soul to Soul, a campaign that's dedicated to the restoration of the deteriorating shoes of children who were murdered during Auschwitz, particularly here in Birkenau. Can you explain the significance of that mission? Does it bring you any kind of a solace over what happened to your grandmother and millions of others?
About 3 years ago, I was sitting in my mother's lounge, and there I discovered a shoebox of memories that my late grandmother, Tamara Zisserman, of blessed memory, left for us. And there she chronicles her harrowing survival story. At the tender age of 11, the Nazis rounded up her entire family, the entire Jewish community in Belarus, marched them to their graveyards and shot them dead or alive, buried. And the Chodasevich family, a religious Christian family, saved her. They hid her in the chimney. And they paid the ultimate price when the Nazis discovered them for their role, marched them while they were holding their 6-month-old baby to the very graveyard where my family are buried, and shot them there.
That is just unbelievable. I know we'll hear more from you later. I could talk to you far longer, but right now we need to go to the next event. So thank you both so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
And right now we see so many people gathered around the entrance to the Birkenau camp. Again, if you're just joining us, they are walking right along the railway line, the same place that the actual horrific cattle cars brought packed. They were packed with so many people who'd gone some days and sometimes weeks without water or food. People had died along the journey because it was so horrific. Then they arrived here where they were unloaded. And joining me now are two more survivors who are with us today. We have Herschel Greenblatt and we have Celia Kenner. I want to ask you to tell me about your story. Where were you born and how did you survive?
I was born in Ukraine, outside the city of Kremenchuk. My father was originally from Lublin, Poland. In late 1939, he escaped from Lublin after, I guess, the invasion of Poland, and met up with my mother and a group that she was in hiding with in the caves around her hometown. I was born about 3 months before Operation Barbarossa, and late summer of 1941, my mother was badly wounded by some shrapnel, and my father and I and my mother escaped further into Russia, into Ukraine, and we spent almost 3 years in hiding. And
did you lose family members?
My father lost his whole family. My father was the youngest of 16 children.
Oh my gosh.
His brothers and sisters were taken to Belzec concentration camp.
Horrible one.
That's where my father's family were taken, and my mother's family where they were shot to death outside their hometown.
I just cannot imagine.
In Russia.
And Celia, let's go to you now. Tell us your story.
I was born in Lvov, Poland. I was an only child. I was to start school that fall. Obviously, the Germans invaded, and it was on that day that I was to have a famous, important ballet recital. That never took place. My father, my biological father, was drafted to the Russian army. My Polish friends became my enemies, and shortly we had to go to the ghetto. In the ghetto with my mom and some family members, mom being young, strong, and beautiful, drafted to work in the Janowska forced labor camp outside of the ghetto. She would come back only periodically. I was left in charge of my aunt, uncle, and when they would go into hiding, they brought me along. One of the times I was not permitted in. It was to be a long raid. My aunt and uncle went. They thought that we would meet in the morning. They made me cover myself up and wait overnight. In the early morning, I heard footsteps, and my aunt's voice rang out, "Celia, we will not see you anymore."
Oh.
Now I was alone. I had no one to turn to. I became the sort of babysitter for babies that parents left behind in order to go into hiding. They
really
couldn't
can't
take their
imagine
babies.
I'm afraid now we
So-
need to go because we need to take a look at the thousands of people who are now streaming
Okay.
in. I would like to thank
Okay.
you both so much again
Okay.
for taking time. I know you need to also go to the ceremony. Your granddaughter, congratulations. Really, my daughter marched here before as well. Congratulations. Thank you
Okay.
again, Herschel
Okay.
Greenblatt and Celia Kenner. Thank you so much for being with
Okay,
us.
so I didn't get to say that it was the Polish family
Who helped-
risked
who
their
hid you.
life
Right.
to save me. They saved me, and a family like mine was hung out the window across the street. So they put me in their barn, where unbeknownst to me, they were hiding my mother. So now mother and I were reunited in a barn, which the family did not know about, only my Polish mother. Eventually, we were reunited after the war, my father from Russia, my mother and I, as an intact family.
Wow, how
So-
unusual and how fortunate.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much again
Okay.
for sharing with us in such a brief time.
Okay.
So many poignant moments.
Thank you for
And I
doing
would like
what
to
you're
mention,
doing.
in case you need to hurry, that the official ceremony will begin, I've just been told, in about 5 minutes. We now see young people gathering just ahead of the ceremony. Many of them have extremely somber faces. It's obviously not a happy event, and yet it is. There's a juxtaposition here. People are so happy to be part of the March of the Living, to show that despite so many efforts to carry out a genocide, an utter genocide of the Jewish people, we are here, we are strong, and we have so many supporters, because there are a lot of non-Jewish participants here today in a sign of strong solidarity with the Jewish people, with the state of Israel, and it's important for them to be here today. Joining me right now is one of those young participants, Jacob, last name Spall. And tell us why you're here. Do you have family members who are survivors?
So I do not have any survivor family members, but I'm here with the Los Angeles delegation. There's about 170 teens who all come together.
170?
Yeah, who've all come together to kind of experience the march, and it's kind of surreal experience. And
Is this part of your high school programming, or is this separate?
so it's separate. All the Jewish teens from kind of the surrounding high schools can come together and take part in this amazing trip and kind of really understand what happened and hear stories from survivors.
Do you have family members?
I do not personally.
Are you Jewish?
Yes, I am.
And so, through your Jewish education or your family, how important has the Holocaust been in growing up and understanding about it? How much of a focus has that been for you?
It's been very important. I feel like a lot of people nowadays are forgetting about it and people don't hear about it enough. So my parents and friends have really stressed to me that like you need to learn about it more, you need to share the story and speak about it and educate others.
I remember when I was your age, and I was raised in Colorado, spent most of my life in Israel, but I remember some of my contemporaries, my peers, had never heard of the Holocaust, which shocked me even then. But do you encounter that?
Rarely. Living in Los Angeles, there's a lot of people, Jews and people who've heard about the Holocaust, but
True.
There's definitely people who've heard of it but know nothing about it.
I can completely understand that. Sorry, we just couldn't quite hear you, so I'll help you there. And there's a lot of wind, as you can feel it. But so this is your first visit here?
This is my first time, yes.
How have you been feeling so far? If you can share with us what you're experiencing.
It's been amazing. It's a very unique feeling. It's kind of hard to describe. It's surreal, but at the same time, it's like meaningful because I'm able to meet survivors and see kind of firsthand what happened.
You know, I completely share that with you. It's also my first visit here. I knew a lot about the Holocaust, but being here is different. And I don't know if anyone's pointed out to you, and our audience can't see it, but right to the immediate right of us is one of the crematoria, and there's also one over on the left. So we are right between such ghastly and unimaginable sights. So it's different to be here and feel that, isn't it?
Very much
Than
so.
to see a photograph.
Exactly. My whole life I've seen videos, movies, photographs of concentration camps in Poland, and I've now firsthand seeing it in person. It's amazing to see what I've been seeing on TV, but in person it's just a different feeling you can't describe.
So you're one of the younger generation that, you know, my friends refer to as the Instagram generation. And sorry to tell you, but, you know, they're used to TikTok and click, click, click. Is it hard for you or your peers to, or any of the participants who've shared thoughts with you, is it difficult with many young people to connect and remain interested, for example, in a documentary or a book, or a film? Because
well, I know for me personally, it's something that's very important to me and I kind of find dear to my heart. So when anything concerning the Holocaust comes up, it's a lot easier for me to kind of sit down and focus. But I've noticed a lot with my peers that just even like when our survivors are talking, just listening to them and not going on your phone, people have trouble doing or not talking to their friends. So it's kind of hard to watch sometimes people not give their full respect and understand that this is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we're probably going to be the last generation to be able to speak with survivors in person.
Absolutely.
So,
did you happen to, as you were marching today, meet with any survivors, spend time with them?
So not while I was marching, but we have one on our bus who we were able to speak to today and hear her stories, which is very amazing, and ask questions, which is pretty cool.
It's like incredible endurance that these people demonstrate after what they've been through. And I cannot imagine how they feel coming back to these places to revisit them where they lost family members and siblings and sometimes their own children. And is that what you've been exposed to? Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah. Coming from a person like me who has lost no family, I am Jewish, but lost no family, has no physical connection to a place like this, and me experiencing it myself, and then seeing someone like a survivor who either was here or has lost families and friends here, it's crazy to me. I know it's hard for me to be here, but I cannot imagine from their perspective how hard it is.
I really can't. Prior to coming on the march today as part of your trip here, have you visited other death camps?
Not yet. We actually got here yesterday, but I know in the next week or so we're going to be traveling around. I think we come back to Auschwitz and Birkenau tomorrow to be able to kind of fully tour them.
And spend more time. Oh, I'm glad
Yes.
you're going to get a guided tour, because we arrived yesterday and it was really important to me to have a sense of this place, and it gives you even a deeper feeling where you can connect to it. And hopefully, and fortunately, you came here with a certain body of knowledge, which will help you.
Yes.
Will you recognize the sites that you have seen, do you think? I looked at so many photographs before I came. I actually knew what everything was. Are you bringing that
Yes.
level?
I definitely walking into Auschwitz, the entrance, that was kind of very mind-blowing for me because I've seen that picture a million times. So big monuments like that I think are very, I've recognized, but other than that, a lot of it's pretty new to me because I haven't really dove into the small parts of each camp. but I'm kind of excited to learn more about it. And then once I go home, being able to look at pictures and kind of see, oh yeah, I saw that in person. Like I was able to experience that.
I don't know if you noticed this, but I found it yesterday that, and I don't know if our viewers can see it now, but directly behind me, toward the entrance, right back there, is one of the railway cars. And I personally was just stunned to see it, to touch it, to realize how high the platform was. The elderly people, little children, were expected to evacuate quick, and having people scream at them and dogs barking. Could you feel that? Could you sense that? You just passed that railway car.
Yes. It was crazy to see in person because, like, you've seen in movies like Schindler's List, the railway cars and people being crowded on and packed in on them, and you hear stories and read books about it. But really seeing it in person and seeing how high up, as you said, and how real it is, and it's crazy to see. Like, it's so in your face and kind of an amazing thing to witness.
Once again, Jacob, well, thank you so very much for being with us. The ceremony is about to start, so perhaps you need to move over there. Thank you again for being with us, and I wish you a very meaningful and personal connection here. It's something that will stay with you forever. Thank you. So between 20 to 30,000 Jews fought against the Nazis and their collaborators during the Second World War. One of the most prominent of those was Abba Kovner. And he was the first to declare, "We will not go like sheep to the slaughter," after he learned about the mass murder of up to 100,000 people in a place that was called Ponary in Vilnius, Lithuania, which was one of the first locations outside of occupied Poland that had been targeted specifically as a part of the final solution.
Abba Kovner was born in Belarus and moved to Vilna as a young boy, where he was part of the Hashomer Hatzair youth movement. At the end of June 1941, Kovner learned about the mass murder of Jews, told to him by a girl who managed to escape the death pit.
Really thousands of people here. Thousands and thousands of people who came to participate not only in the march, but now they're soon going to take their places before a stage for a very meaningful ceremony. We will see people, survivors, grandchildren of survivors lighting torches in memory of those who were lost here, and the memory of the 6 million Jews who died across Europe as part of that so-called final solution, which again, thank God, was not final. We're seeing close-ups of older people, young people. We're seeing the banners of this year's March of the Living. It is the 35th annual March of the Living. It's a very meaningful day. And I think everyone who I've spoken to so far today has commented about the unique feeling that one gets by actually coming here. And that is one of the missions of the March of the Living, to, as you can hear, perhaps you can hear, they're asking people to now take their seats for what will be a very poignant ceremony. It will include performers, it will include musical interludes. There's so much meaning. So many survivors have managed to come over the years. As we were talking about earlier, I personally cannot imagine what it's like for them to come back here, but they do come with a sense of purpose. Their generation will no longer be with us in a really short time, and many of the guests today have expressed great concern about that. How will the history of what they endured, how will the history of the Shoah, as we say in Hebrew, be carried on when that current generation, the people who lived through that, are no longer with us? Will we be able to sufficiently carry their message so that our descendants, one or two or more generations from now, will remember exactly what happened during the Second World War? Because one of the most familiar phrases you hear is never again. Something like that on that scale should never again happen. Of course, we have witnessed various attempted genocides over the last decade, decade and a half, which is extremely disappointing. And among the people who are the most disturbed by those events in Rwanda and Eastern Europe are people who survived the Holocaust. It hits them particularly hard. I've spoken to survivors who are reflecting on very bloody conflicts and the attempted genocide or utter segregation, again, of other peoples. And for example, Elie Wiesel, who was a survivor, one of the most famous, who spoke out and wrote books about the Holocaust, shared his feelings. He was particularly upset about what was going on in Darfur. He became very active in trying to fight the genocide in Darfur, and his message was it carried particular weight because he was a survivor and what he endured. So let us all hope that with the continuation of learning, the continuation of connecting to this place, by watching these teenagers arrive, that they too will actually become living witnesses to what went on here, because they are seeing the crematoria. They're still here. They're seeing the barracks. They're seeing where the disinfection places are, where the selection took place of who would live and who would die. As I mentioned a little while ago, seeing the actual cattle trains that brought people here, and the number of people who suffered tremendously, not only during that journey, but who couldn't even survive that journey. Extremely young people, infants, old people. The fact they didn't even live to make it to this horrible place. But then, of course, near the end of the war, when Birkenau was an utter killing factory, which is what it became, they were gassing to death nearly 5,000 people a day here. And those horrible crematorium could not even keep up with the number of people who were massacred. So there were piles of their bodies just on the grounds which you are looking at now. Beyond imagination. To see the remains of those crematoria, to see the remains of the gas chambers. I believe that everybody who is here today, everyone who will come in the future, I believe we all become living witnesses by connecting to this place. For 35 years, the International March of the Living has taken place, I think, with that exact mission. I hope it will continue in the coming years. I've had friends. If you're just tuning in, you will hear that my own daughter participated in the year 2011, and I think it affected her until today. She was really touched when she knew that I was coming today. I'm looking around and I'm so pleased to see, you can see all the different flags in addition to the Israeli flag. You can see all the delegations gathering, sitting on these grounds. Some of them are already in chairs, but a lot of the young people are sitting on the grass. They're waiting to be seated, but they're sitting where once, in fact, they're taking selfies, which this generation is apt to do. Some of them are actually celebrating because, again, with it being a very mournful place to be, ultimately this is a happy celebration. Ultimately, it is the March of the Living. Many of these young people you're looking at, many of them are descendants of survivors. They have surviving grandparents. And this is the March of the Living. This is either, we're coming up on the third generation as well as the fourth generation of surviving ancestors. Something is very interesting you can look into. There have been a lot of psychological studies about not just the trauma of someone who went through the camp experience or survived the Holocaust in one manner or another, but the incredible impact that had on their children, hearing their parents' stories. And now there are studies being done on the impact that the Holocaust had on the third generation of Holocaust survivors, because it's something that is carried with you. It's something that carries down through the generations. And as the young participant I just spoke to commented, he had no personal connection to this place, but as a young Jewish fellow, he knew about it, he's been educated about it, and he wanted to come here and to learn. Joining me now is Alex Trayman, who you saw at the beginning of this broadcast and several times throughout, who was stationed in Auschwitz at the beginning of the march. Alex, how is it? You've been here many times before. How it was today for you? Was there anything different about today?
Well, this is my second time here. It's been 4 years. And every time is really like the first time you've been here, because you're reliving a piece of history that is just beyond logic, beyond sanity. And when you come back to this place, you go into that same deep emotional feeling. And I don't think, maybe some of these people that I met, survivors that have been here for 20 years now in a row, you know, they've gotten used to it. But I don't think this is really an experience that you can get used to.
I agree.
Where we're sitting.
Thank you, Alex, for sharing what you felt today. And we now move to live coverage of the closing ceremony of the International March of the Living 2023, being held at the base of the crematorium in the Birkenau extermination camp, where Holocaust survivors, leaders, and young people will be heard, along with a recitation of a prayer in memory of the 6 million Jews who were murdered during the Holocaust.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can I please ask you one final time to take your seats? I am about to commence the ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Greg Maisel, and on behalf of the International March of the Living, I welcome you to this afternoon's Yom HaShoa ceremony. This year, on Holocaust Remembrance Day, we salute Jewish heroism in the Holocaust and the miracle of the human spirit, as we commemorate 80 years since the courageous Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Today, we were privileged to be joined by 42 Holocaust survivors from around the world who marched with us. Dear survivors, please stand up. Please stand up. Thank you. Thank you for your bravery. Thank you for your courage. and thank you for keeping the torch of Holocaust memory alive. I would like to ask all of the audience to please stand up and join the survivors standing, as we will now hear a 1-minute memorial siren which will be sounded in memory of those who perished in the Holocaust. We stand in their honor. Please be seated.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone on narrow streets of cobblestone, beneath the halo of a street lamp. I turned my collar to the cold and damp. When my eyes were stabbed, the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing songs that the voices never share. No one dared disturb the sound of silence. So fool, said I, you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words that I might teach you. Take my arms that I might reach you. But my words, like the silent raindrops, fell and echoed in the wells of silence. And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made, in the words that he was forming. Then the sign said, the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls, tenement halls, and whispered in the sound of silence.
Approximately 10,000 participants marched in unity today. Each of you follow in the footsteps of some 300,000 alumni of the March of the Living, who have walked along this same path since the first march in 1988. That march, which took place 35 years ago, was led by one of the organization co-founders and visionaries, Dr. Shmuel Rosenman. Today I am pleased to call Shmuel to the stage.
Today, and in the days that follow, marks three profoundly important anniversaries. 8 years ago, in 1943, a small band of heroic Jewish fighters launched the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Only 5 years later, in 1948, the Jewish state was established, reborn in the land of Israel after 2,000 years of Jewish exile. And in 1988, a rising tide of anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial was all over the world. I am proud to have been among the founders of the March of the Living. Reflecting the past, there is a little doubt that our dream making a difference has become a 35 years reality for participants around the world. In 1990, Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel, in voice filled with despair, said to those gathered here, "How can one not be concerned with anti-Semitism? We are convinced that anti-Semitism perished here. Anti-Semitism did not perish here. Its victim perished here." It is our hope that you, the next generation of witnesses for the witnesses, will commit to be the torchbearers of memory and fight against global anti-Semitism. It is our hope that the seeds planted here in the March of the Living journey today will help to ensure a brighter tomorrow for the Jewish people and all humanity. Each time we return to Poland, we perform an act of modern-day resistance and proclaim a powerful reality. Hatred and evil did not win back then, and hatred and evil will not win now. Let me conclude by thanking our Holocaust survivors and our students for joining us here, year after year, and committing to the values of human dignity, equality, and survival. On behalf of those dedicated to ensuring the future by remembering the past, I pledge to you that we will continue to return here each Holocaust Remembrance Day, as long as there will still one drop, 1 ounce, 1 instance of anti-Semitism left in the world. Never again.
I am honored to invite Mr. Sergio Mattarella, President of the Italian Republic.
Rivolgo un saluto caloroso
e un ringraziamento alla Marcia dei Vivi, ai suoi organizzatori, a tutti i partecipanti, alle autorità presenti. Un saluto particolare ai sopravvissuti, preziosi testimoni della verità. Siamo qui oggi a rendere omaggio, a far memoria dei milioni di cittadini assassinati da un regime sanguinario come quello nazista, che con la complicità dei regimi fascisti europei che consegnarono propri concittadini ai carnefici si macchiò di un crimine orrendo contro l'umanità, un crimine atroce che non può conoscere né oblio né perdono. In 4 anni, dal 1941 al 1945, in questo complesso furono assassinate centinaia di migliaia di persone, ben oltre 1 milione, in ragione della propria appartenenza a una fede, a una cultura, in ragione delle loro convinzioni o della loro condizione. Nei campi nazisti, oltre 1 milione di ebrei, bersaglio di quella disumana macchina di orrore, anche oppositori politici, sinti, rom, disabili, omosessuali, trovarono la morte nelle camere a gas, o per il freddo, la fatica, la fame e le malattie, o ancora perché vittime di esperimenti criminali. Cittadini innocenti di ogni parte d'Europa furono tradotti bestialmente a questo luogo di morte, un immenso cimitero senza tombe. Possiamo recarci al muro della morte, ma se pensiamo alle vittime dobbiamo alzare lo sguardo ben oltre. Tu passerai per il camino, minacciavano i capò e le guardie dei lager. La Polonia si trovò a pagare un prezzo altissimo in termini di vite umane durante l'occupazione nazista. Tra l'autunno del 1943 e gli ultimi mesi del 1944, anche migliaia di italiani furono deportati qui dall'Italia. Per la quasi totalità di loro fu un viaggio senza ritorno. Non a caso, Polonia e Italia sono tra le nazioni europee più impegnate a conservare la memoria dell'Olocausto e a promuoverne la conoscenza tra i giovani. Rincuora vedere che migliaia di ragazze e ragazzi danno vita ogni anno a questa marcia. Quest'anno ci accompagnano in questa esperienza indimenticabile 2 sorelle italiane sopravvissute agli orrori di Birkenau, Tatiana e Andra Bucci. Con loro, giovani studenti del mio paese. A Tatiana e Andra va il ringraziamento di noi tutti. Oggi più che mai, nel riproporsi i temi e argomenti che avvelenarono la stagione degli anni 30 del secolo scorso, con l'infuriare dell'aggressione russa all'Ucraina, la memoria dell'Olocausto rimane un monito perenne che non può essere evaso. L'odio, il pregiudizio, il razzismo, l'estremismo, l'antisemitismo, l'indifferenza, il delirio, la volontà di potenza sono in agguato, sfidano in permanenza la coscienza delle persone e dei popoli. Non può essere ammesso nessun cedimento alle manifestazioni di intolleranza e di violenza, nessun arretramento nella tutela dei diritti e delle libertà fondamentali, base del nostro convivere pacifico. Chi aggredisce l'ordine internazionale fondato su questi principi deve sapere che i popoli liberi sono e saranno uniti e determinati nel difenderli. Cari sopravvissuti, care ragazze e cari ragazzi, autorità, oggi è il giorno del Yom HaShoa, la giornata del ricordo dell'Olocausto. Ricordare è dimensione di impegno, è dimostrazione che contro gli araldi dell'oblio la memoria vince, per affermare l'orgoglio di essere persone umane, per ripetere e ribadire mai più.
Miss Helena Birnbaum, a poet and author, was a 14-year-old girl hiding in a bunker in the Warsaw Ghetto on April the 19th, 1943, the night when the Warsaw Ghetto uprising began. Many years later, she wrote in wonder about that night, the heroism, the love of life, and the hope for the future. I do not believe that I am actually that girl, the girl who is today a mother and a grandmother, that girl that was not caught, was not burnt, was not suffocated, the night of the Jewish uprising, the night of horrors, the night of supreme heroism.
In the summer of 1942, the mass deportation from Warsaw Ghetto began. 265,000 Jews were sent to the Treblinka death camp, to their extinction. Only 60,000 Jews remained. In the Warsaw Ghetto, two underground organizations were emerging at the same time. It was on the 19th of April, 1943, the first night of Passover, that marks the formal start of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. Against thousands of marching Nazi German soldiers, 700 young Jewish men and women stood strong, without almost any weapons or experience in warfare. This heroic story will now be shared in their own words. The day before the outbreak of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, the square and the streets of the ghetto were empty and abandoned. People preparing to go underground, fighters to their battle positions and outposts. We were to cause the enemy a heavy loss.
When the day dawned, I saw the thousands of Germans surrounding the ghetto with machine guns, with cannons, and there we stood opposite them, some 20 young men and women. Each one had a revolver. The entire unit had 2 rifles, homemade bombs.
Beginning from today, we shall shift over to partisan tactics. It is impossible to describe the conditions under which the Jews of the ghetto are now living. Only a few will be able to hold out.
I detonated the explosives. I was shocked into inaction after the massive explosion and German bodies flying in the air. This was the first time since the war had broken out that the Germans were running away.
The Germans fled twice from the ghetto. One of our military wings fought for 40 minutes, and the other for over 6 hours.
The Germans set fire to the ghetto.
והיא שעמדה לאבותינו, והיא שעמדה לאבותינו ולנו, שלא אחד בלבד עמד עלינו לכלותנו, עומד לכלותנו. והיא שעמדה לאבותינו, והיא שעמדה לאבותינו ולנו, שלא אחד בלבד עומד עלינו לכלותנו, עומד לכלותנו. והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו, מצילנו מידם. והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו, מצילנו מידם. והיא שעמדה לאבותינו, והיא שעמדה לאבותינו ולנו, שלא אחד בלבד עומד עלינו לכלותנו, עומד עלינו לכלותנו. והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו, מצילנו מידם. והקדוש ברוך הוא אוי מצילנו, מצילנו מידם. שלא אחד בלבד עומד עלינו לכלותנו, לכלותנו. והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו, הקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו מידם. והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו, מצילנו מידם. והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו, מצילנו מידם.
The Minister of Education of the State of Israel, Mr. Yoav Kish.
Here at Birkenau, I stand today as the Minister of Education of the State of Israel, with all of you, participants of the March of the Living. I marched today from Auschwitz to Birkenau, marched and remembered our brothers and sisters who were tortured, murdered, and burned alive here on this cursed ghetto. I stand here and salute the Holocaust survivors, those whom the horrors of the Holocaust are burned into their flesh and mind forever. Many of them are no longer among us. Many of them managed, in spite of all, to build new life from ashes after the war, and even to raise a family, but never forgot what they went through. I salute the Jewish heroes who fought against the Nazis and their collaborators. One of them is my grandfather, Brigadier Frederick Herman Kish, Zichrono Livracha. I never met my grandfather. He was a soldier and a warrior in the British Army. He participated in World War I, and in 1919 he took part in the Versailles Peace Conference of the world powers as a representative of the British Army. He immigrated to the land of Israel and was one of the leaders of the Jewish Yeshuv before the founding of the state. During World War II, he re-enlisted into the British Army and was the chief engineering officer of the 8th Army under General Montgomery. My grandfather was a brigadier general, the highest-ranking Jew in the British Army. He took part in the Battle of El Alamein, which became a turning point in the North African campaign. He fought to stop the Nazis from keep advancing deep into North Africa. They had a target. From there, they wanted to get into the land of Israel. In January 1943, the British troops advanced, and near Tripoli, my grandfather fought to free the Jado concentration camp, where Germans and Italians had concentrated the Jews of Libya, aiming to exterminate them. He liberated the Jews from the concentration camp, introducing himself to the camp survivors as a Jewish fighter. He was privileged to be their liberator. In my view, this is the achievement that most symbolize the transition from darkness to light, from death to revival. This is my grandfather's achievement, which I am most proud of. By the end of the war, at the age of 55, my grandfather was killed in Wadi Akrit. 2 landmines exploded and led to his death. He was buried in a British military cemetery in Tunisia, near where he was killed. My grandfather, Brigadier Kish, fought against the Nazis and sacrificed his life for the Jewish people. I'm here to represent the Israeli government, and my son Eyal, who is also here, marched today to represent the Israeli youth. Am Israel Chai!